Mother's Day is coming up, and so that means you need to get your mom a card, and you need to tie some of these up. This is Simon with Caddis Fly Shop and Oregon Fly Fishing Blog, and this is a spent Mother's Day caddis. A lot of people, it depends where you live, what part of the country you're in, this can be a really big deal of a hatch some places, other places. It can be really finicky. Unfortunately, we are in the latter of that, those two choices. A lot of people really don't like this hatch. It can be really difficult. But fishing a spent bug that has died after it is, mated and completed its life cycle is a really great way to get large fish to come up and eat these flies. So this uses a lot of cool different stuff on it. It deliberately is tied so it looks like a dead caddis fly laying on the water. So we'll take a closer look at the fly itself, and you definitely should tie some up in the coming future, because it can be really hard to get these fish to eat a standard adult caddis fly for this specific catch. So we're starting off here with a fully mill hook. We've taken a liking to fully mill and Ahrex lately. This is the fully mill 50/50 ultimate dry in black nickel in a 12. Because they feel a little bit smaller than they are, I think, at least with your tying space on the shank. And I've got some Semperfli classic wax thread. I've also taken a liking to this. To me, it feels kind of like nano silk from Semperfli, but it doesn't slip. And on a fly like this, you don't want a whole lot of slippage. There's a bunch of moving parts, and having stuff slip kind of sucks. Next, we have more fully mill stuff. This is a lot of fully mill stuff on one fly. This is some March Tactical Dry Fly Dub March Brown. Gray would also work, but the caddis bodies actually have kind of like a tannish gray color. I opted for tan because there's not really one in between. I guess I could have mixed the dubbing, but they kind of do have like a tannish color. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a body back here. Just a very slim thorax. Remember, bugs are little, so we don't need a lot. And we're going to bring it up here. And here is your little caddis thorax right here. And that's really, we're going to do just one more little bump, and we're going to do a little trick just to avoid a little bit more slippage. If we lay down a really small layer of dubbing, we won't have any slipping where we're going to put our parachute post or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fully mill ultra dry yarn. This stuff's really cool. If you look here, this little diagram, each individual fiber is hollow and has 4 little holes running through the whole length. So this stuff is super buoyant. This is what fully mill uses for a bunch of their dry flies. It's what they use for their parachute posts often. It's really cool material. You can always tell a fully milled dry fly because the parachute post is like a little puff on the top, which you will see in this video. Just a little bit different, and I think it's cool stuff. So the Grannom caddis hatch is notoriously difficult, at least here in the Northwest. And because it's kind of tricky, I am creating a fly that is having a really hard time. So the Grannom caddis hatch, you can do pretty good when all the adults come back and die on the water, and if you can time it right. And or this looks like a crippled caddis that was emerging, but it looks more like a spent adult. And if you can time that right, normally you'll see a large cloud of caddis coming upstream, and they'll kind of start falling and dying soon after you see the big migration of adults. I'm taking some mule deer hair because it's a little bit more fine. It's a little bit easier to work with. It does not afford as much buoyancy, but that's kind of what we want, making a dead adult caddis fly. And we're going to take a little pinch of it here after we created these spent wings right here. And we're going to tie it right back here to the end of the, I would say just past the end of the shank. Doesn't need to be super long. And then we're going to measure first. To me, that looks a little bit too long. So we're going to kind of measure, and then we're going to crank it down slowly. You don't want this to pop. And you also don't want it to slip down the sides. So what we're going to do once we kind of have it in the right area is we actually are going to take a wrap behind the we'll take a wrap right here behind it, and that'll ensure it's not really going to go anywhere. And so once we kind of open up the body a little bit like that, it my bobbin's giving me trouble. And once we open the body up like this a little bit, we're going to kind of pull it tight, and we don't want to pop our thread like that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to crank down, and it'll splay everything out. And for this part, I actually did switch my thread to something a little bit different. I really needed the nano silk to fully splay this wing out. Unfortunately, the Semperfly classic thread that I grabbed was the wrong strength, which for this fly at least. It's a great thread, but for what I'm doing, I needed something I could crank on pretty hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, to clean up these edges and make sure they're going where you want, you're going to have to take some wraps behind it. But then what we're going to do is as you pull tight, we will kind of come through this mess of junk like this, and then pull another bunch up, and then we're going to start trimming all this stuff off. And we got to trim it pretty close because we have to squeeze a parachute on here. This is where having a cautery is kind of helpful. I'm going to trim a bunch of it off, but I actually will be able to burn it down pretty low, which is helpful. Yeah, you do. All right, so what we're going to do here is if you have either trim it down real low, or if you have a cautery, just start burning some of this stuff away. So give you a little bit more space to work. Just make sure you don't get your thread. Probably don't breathe that stuff in also. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think it's good for you. And so we'll take a little bump of this ultra dry yarn. And this is how we're going to make our parachute. So we're going to take it and we're going to tie it in here, right up on the top like this. And just like any other parachute, you really got to lock it in first. And then we will tie in our feather too. I had a feather I pulled off somewhere here. Where'd that? Here it is. I have a little black saddle hackle here. Don't want something too big for this. Just something small. We're going to lock this in. And then we are going to make our parachute post. So, yeah. Just gonna kind of open that eyelet up just a little bit more. Give myself a little bit more space to work. Okay, now that I've given myself a little bit more space, we're gonna make this post. And so to make the post, you just wrap the thread around the yarn. It's kind of a pain, but as long as you keep tension, it works pretty good. And you don't need a ton of it you don't need a ton of it. You just need to have just enough to make a couple of wraps with that hackle and the rest will do its magic. And you do want to keep it pretty low. So all these wraps that kind of lock this whole post in place should be fairly low to the fly. So that's what you want to end up with, just like a little post like that. What we're going to do now is we're going to put just a little bit of dubbing on the head to finish things up.
Good.
And here we go. We got our dubbing here. And we'll just kind of lightly dub this on. Make sure we keep our hackle locked in where it needs to be. And then we will wrap our hackle in. Okay. So it may take a couple of tries. It's kind of tight working up here. If you think it's going to be tight, you could always size the fly up a little bit. I find that fishing something a little bit bigger is actually easier with that Grannom caddis hatch. The fish can be really selective on what they're eating. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this. We don't need too many wraps, just enough to kind of add a little bit of buoyancy on the front. That's the whole idea of this. You can hackle it as heavy as you want, but the hackle doesn't need to go up too tall, and I would keep the bulk of your hackling down low. So that's where it really matters. And don't worry if you knock some of that deer hair, you can always help it back like that. All right, there's our little parachute. So we're going to lock it off with our thread down here, right along the bottom. Nice thing about this nano silk is it just kind of works through all those fibers. And we're going to trim this. And then I'm going to make my whip finish before we have an accident here. But here is an awesome spent Mother's Day caddis. Like I said, a lot of times this is the game you got to play with these guys, give them a cripple or something. And this is a great imitation of a spent adult. And this is what I was talking about. I'll show you guys in a sec here with how it makes like a big kind of poof on top. And if you use more, it makes it even more poofy. But that adds additional buoyancy, and then we'll measure these back and cut them. And there's our spent wings on our caddis. And here's a great spent Mother's Day caddis pattern for the Grannom caddis hatch, or Mother's Day caddis, whatever you want to call it. You can see we have both of these wings splayed out here. Looks like a nice, easy, juicy meal for a hungry trout. You can get all this stuff online at caddisflyshop.com, or come in the store if you're local and get all the stuff for it. Thanks.